I woke up to the sound of rain drumming on the roof of my old house. 67 years old and getting up at 5 in the morning is still easy, a habit developed over decades. My name is Bert Holloway, and for the past 32 years, I've owned the River Edge restaurant in Zionsville, a small town that never appears on tourist maps, but has its own unique character. I brewed coffee, strong, no sugar, and sat by the window, looking out at the wet street. The rain always reminded me of Helen. My wife loved mornings like this. 4 years have passed since she was gone. Cancer took her quickly and ruthlessly, leaving behind a void that cannot be filled. My house doesn't look like the dwelling of a successful business owner. A small two-story cottage on a quiet street, modest furniture, most of it more than 20 years old. No expensive paintings or crystal, just pictures. Lots of pictures of Helen and me, and a few with my son Noah. Noah is complicated, especially since his mother died. He's 38, an accountant at Pearson Buildings, married to Abby, and they have a son, Ethan, 12 years old, my only grandson. It seems like a normal American family, but it's not that simple. I finished my coffee, got dressed, and left the house. My old 98-year-old Chevy looks unremarkable, but it's reliable as a clock. A 15-minute drive, and I'm at my restaurant. River Edge is in a beautiful spot on the high bank of Eagle Creek. From here, you have a view of the city and the water. We're not open to the public yet, but the kitchen is already bustling with activity. "Good morning, Mr. Holloway." Ray, a chef who has worked with me for 20 years, greeted me. "Morning, Ray. How's the family?" "Fine, thank you. My daughter got into college. I was really happy for him. Ray is one of the people I consider family. Not by blood, but by spirit. I don't have many of those in my life." I made my way to my little office in the back of the restaurant. From here, I managed the whole process: orders, deliveries, finances. Never like to flaunt my position. A lot of diners don't even know who owns River Edge. I prefer to watch from the sidelines. The history of the restaurant began 32 years ago. Before that, I worked as a cook in various establishments, saving every dime, working night shifts. Helen and I lived very modestly to realize our dream. When we saved enough for a down payment, we took out a loan and bought a dilapidated old sawmill building on the beach. Everyone said we were crazy. The place was abandoned and the restaurant business was risky. But Helen believed in me, and I believed in my kitchen. We put not only money into this place, but also our souls. For the first 5 years, we worked practically no weekends. I stood at the stove, Helen took care of the room and the bookkeeping. Gradually, the River Edge developed a reputation. Not fancy, but a cozy place with great food and fair prices. Now the restaurant is my life. I haven't cooked myself for a long time, but I control every detail. We have a steady stream of customers, good revenue. I could have expanded a long time ago, opened a chain, but I don't see the point. One place that brings good income and joy is enough for me. I went over yesterday's reports and made a few calls to vendors. Then I pulled out my checkbook and wrote another check for Noah. $4,500. That's the amount I've been remitting to him monthly for years now. $2,000 goes to partially pay their mortgage, $1,500 for Ethan's private school tuition, and another $1,000 just for expenses. It started shortly after their grandson was born. At first, it was just temporary hardship. Then it became a tradition. I never said no, partly because of Helen. She was always spoiling Noah, partly out of guilt. As a child, I worked a lot and was rarely home. And after she died, helping her son became a way for me to keep in touch with her. Putting the check in the envelope, I thought about it. Noah makes good money for a mid-level accountant. Not rich, but it should be enough for a decent living. If it weren't for the constant emergency expenses, that car broke down, or repairs to the house, or a vacation at a resort to restore his health. In recent years, these requests have become more persistent and frequent. The phone interrupted my thoughts. "Dad, it's me." Noah's voice sounded a little tense. "Hello, son. Is something wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong. I was just wondering if you sent the money. We've had some, unforeseen circumstances." I sighed. It's always the same. "I just wrote a check. I'll drop it off tonight." "Why don't you just put it on the card?" There was a pleading tone in my son's voice. "We need to pay for something urgently." "What is it?" "It's nothing," he mumbled. Abby had some expenses at her mother's salon. The salon again. Veronica, Abby's mother, had opened it 3 years ago, investing the money from her divorce from her husband. Vera Beauty is what she called it. According to Noah, the business was constantly on the verge of profitability. And according to my observations, on the verge of bankruptcy, and only my regular injections kept it afloat. Though neither Veronica nor Abby knew it. Okay, I'll transfer it right now, I said, feeling tired. Thanks, Dad. You're a real lifesaver. By the way, Abby's mom is inviting you to her birthday party next Friday. It's at some new restaurant downtown. I almost choked. Veronica had never been very fond of me. Our rare meetings were always strained. She looked down on me, even though she was barely making ends meet. Why don't you celebrate at home? I asked. No way, Dad. It's an anniversary. 55 years. We need to celebrate with a bang. You should definitely come. Something in his voice told me that it wasn't about my company. Who else is coming? Just us. The family circle. Me, Abby, Ethan, Abby's mom, and you. And the restaurant. What kind of restaurant? I don't remember the name. Something to do with the river. Abby says it's a fancy place. Classy. My insides are all tight. Really, it wouldn't happen to be River Edge, would it? I asked in as indifferent a tone as possible. Yes, it is. Do you know it? Do I know him? I held back a chuckle. I've heard of him. Okay, I'll be there. Oh, great. Abby made a reservation for 7 o'clock tonight. When the conversation was over, I leaned back in my chair. She made a reservation at my own restaurant, and neither Noah nor his wife even know I own it. In all the years, they've never once inquired exactly where my restaurant is located or what it's called. Some little restaurant on the outskirts was what Abby used to say about it when it came to my work. I remembered how things had changed after Noah's wedding. Helen was still alive then. She disliked Abby immediately, sensing something fake about her. She doesn't love him, Bert, her wife said. All she wants is stability. I brushed it off as just my mother-in-law's usual jealousy. Now I realize Helen was right. After she died 5 years ago, Noah became even more distant. Our meetings became a formality. He only called when he needed money, and his sister-in-law didn't even hide her disdain for me. Old man living in the past, stuck in the last century, loser who never managed to develop his business. These phrases, which I overheard by chance, spoke volumes. I opened online banking and transferred the money to Noah's account. Then I checked the reservation for the following Friday. Indeed, a table for 5 in the name of Whitney, Veronica's maiden name. I called Alice, our lounge manager. My family is coming next Friday, I told her. They don't know I'm the owner. Alice raised her eyebrows in surprise. They don't know at all? Not at all. And I want to keep it that way, for now. All right, Mr. Holloway. I'll alert the staff. A table in the main dining room? Yes, and Alice. Serve them as regular customers. No special privileges. She nodded understandingly and walked out. Alice had worked with me for 10 years and was one of the few people I trusted completely. I looked at Helen's picture on the desk again. What would she say now? Probably advise me to stop this game of secret benefactor. She'd always been more straightforward than me. Bert, I thought I heard her voice. You're not helping them. You're making it worse. Maybe she's right. In the last year, I've transferred almost $60,000 to my son, not counting emergency loans that have never been repaid. At the same time, I live modestly, drive an old car, and haven't bought new clothes in years. It's not about being stingy. I just don't see the point in ostentatious luxury. My restaurant brings in a steady income. I have investments, real estate. I could live a much richer life, but why? To impress people who don't care about me? The day flew by. I made purchases, communicated with clients, solved current issues. In the evening, when the restaurant was filled with customers, I watched from my office through a special one-way window. I loved watching people enjoying their food, socializing, laughing. In those moments, I felt like it wasn't all for nothing. On my way home, I stopped by my son's house. They lived in an upscale neighborhood, in a big house that they clearly couldn't afford. Without my help, they would have lost it long ago. Abby answered the door, a slender blonde with perfect makeup and cold eyes. Designer clothes, expensive jewelry. She winked faintly when she saw me. Ah, Bert. Noah said you'd be stopping by. Come on in. Not even a hello or a, how are you? I'd long ago given up expecting basic politeness from her. Noah was in the living room staring at his laptop. My son was of average height, with a bald spot on his face and a perpetually tired expression. Sometimes I could hardly recognize him as the cheerful boy he had been as a child. Hi, Dad. He looked away from the screen. Thanks for the translation. It's a big help. You're welcome. Where's Ethan? He's at a friend's house for a sleepover. They're doing a school project. I nodded. I rarely saw my grandson. Abby always found reasons why I couldn't see him. He was busy, or sick, or had important things to do. The only thing she was interested in was his school fees. I confirmed that I'll be at Veronica's birthday party, I said. 7 o'clock at River Edge. Yes, Abby confirmed, coming back into the room with a glass of wine. It's the trendiest restaurant in town right now. My mom and I have been wanting to go there for a long time. I hope you like it, I said discreetly. I'm sure it doesn't compare to your little family place. Abby smiled, but her eyes remained cold. They say they have an amazing food and wine list. I didn't say anything. My son coughed awkwardly. Dad, we've been thinking, he started. We'd like to give Abby's mom a nice present. Would you mind? How much? 5,000, Abby said quickly. We want to get her some exclusive jewelry. She does so much for us. I chuckled mentally. Veronica never did anything for me except show her superiority, but I was tired of arguing. All right, I'll translate tomorrow. Achoo, you're the best, Noah exclaimed. But there was no sincerity in his voice, just relief. As I walked away, I turned around and saw them look at each other. There was a look of satisfaction in their eyes. It was as if they'd fooled the old fool again. On the way home, I thought about dinner. What would happen when they found out the truth? When they realized that all these years they had despised the man they had lived off of? I don't know why, but I felt strangely relieved, as if the end of a long and tedious game was at hand. At home, I sat in a chair and turned on the old vinyl record player, the only luxury I allowed myself. Jazz filled the room. Helen loved jazz. Such a way. You were right, darling, I said into the void. It was time to change things up. A week before Veronica's birthday, I decided to stop by the Vera Beauty Salon. Not that I needed the services of a stylist. I just wanted to see for myself where my money was going. The salon was located in a strip mall on the west side of Zionsville, an area that was considered upscale among the locals. Parking in the lot, I took my time getting out of the car. Through the window, I could see Abby sitting at the front desk, staring intently at something on her phone. She was wearing a blouse I'd seen in a designer clothing catalog. I happened to notice the price while flipping through a magazine in the dentist's waiting room. $600 for a piece of fabric. Finally, I got out of the car and headed for the entrance. The bell above the door jingled melodiously. Abby looked up and her face ran the gamut from surprise to poorly concealed irritation. Bert, what are you doing here? No hello, no smile. Only bewilderment, as if I'd broken into her bedroom instead of a public place. I was getting a haircut, I lied. My regular barber had retired. It was only partially true. Joe had indeed closed his little barbershop after 40 years in business. But I wasn't too worried about it. Anyone could handle my simple haircut. Abby faked a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Well, she looked me over from head to toe, assessing my worn jeans and simple shirt. We usually work by appointment, but we don't have many customers right now. I think Tiffany can accommodate you. She pressed the internal intercom button. Tiff, we have a client without an appointment for a haircut. Can you do that? There was a muffled response, and a moment later, a young girl with pink hair emerged from the back of the salon. Sure, come on in. She smiled at me with a much warmer smile than my sister-in-law. While I was getting my haircut, I furtively looked around the salon. The room was decorated with taste, expensive furniture, crystal chandeliers, marble countertops. But there really weren't many customers. I counted only 3, including me. With such expenses on the interior and rent in a prestigious location, the business should have burst a year ago, if it weren't for my money. Is this your first time here? Tiffany asked, fiddling with her scissors. Yeah, I was just passing through and thought I'd stop by. You're lucky. We're usually hard to get in without an appointment. We're the most popular salon in the neighborhood. I nodded politely, even though I could see with my own eyes that it wasn't true. I guess that's what they were told to say, to create the illusion of success. While I was getting my hair cut, Veronica entered the salon. Even if I hadn't known who she was, I would have recognized her as Abby's mother. The same haughty look, the same behavior of someone who was used to thinking of herself as superior to others. Despite her age, soon to be 55, she looked younger thanks to her obviously inexpensive cosmetic procedures. Perfectly styled brown hair, impeccable makeup, a pantsuit that screamed of its costliness. Veronica glanced around the salon and frowned when she saw the empty chairs. Then she noticed me and wrinkled her nose slightly. Abby, honey, her voice was honeyed, but with a distinct metallic note. I didn't realize it was Charity Day. Abby looked up from the phone and smiled nervously. Mom, this is Noah's father. He just came in for a haircut. Oh, Bert, Veronica acted surprised as if she just noticed me. What a surprise. Unexpected. Usually our customers prefer more specialized establishments. I knew exactly what she meant. Cheaper places. For the working man. I decided to support the family business, I said calmly. That's nice. Veronica smiled falsely. Sarn, I hope you didn't spend your last pension on this. Tiffany, who was giving me a haircut, flinched slightly at this blatant rudeness, but kept silent. Don't worry about my pension, I said. Better tell me how things are going in the salon. Are you prospering? Of course. Veronica proudly raised her head. We are in the top 3 salons in the city. Clients sign up a month in advance. I looked around the half-empty room, but I didn't comment. Obviously, Veronica lives in a world of her own illusions, or deliberately lies, even to herself. After the haircut I paid, Tiffany did it neatly, though not better than old Joe for a third of the price. As I left the salon, I heard Veronica reprimanding Abby. Why did you even take it? It tarnishes the image of the salon. Mom, I couldn't say no. He is Noah's father, after all. That's why you had to find a polite way to say no. You could have told him we were busy. I'm sorry, I'll think of something next time. There won't be a next time. After the anniversary, I'm going to have a serious talk with Noah. It's about time he got custody of his father. The old man's clearly not himself, walking around like that. I shut the door quietly without listening. Is that how it is? I give them money to live on, and they plan to declare me incompetent? That's ridiculous. Back at the restaurant, the first thing I did was check the ledgers. Over the past year, I transferred about $85,000 into Noah and Veronica's accounts. Some of it went directly to my son for his mortgage, Ethan's tuition, and other necessities. Some of it went through a shell company to Veronica's salon, ostensibly for consulting services and equipment rentals. I sighed. Helen wouldn't have approved of this. She'd always said that love wasn't about indulging weaknesses, but helping them overcome them. Bert, you're making him worse every time you save him from the consequences of his choices, she once said when Noah once again asked for money to pay off the loan he'd taken out to buy an expensive motorcycle. She was probably right. I had let them take advantage of me for too long, and that's where it got me. Not only did they not appreciate my help, but they thought I was a burden, an old fool to get rid of. The phone interrupted my musings. Dad, it's about the money for Abby's mom's present, Noah began, without preamble. You said you'd wire it today. Yeah, I remember, I replied. You see, we have to order the gift in advance. It's exclusive jewelry, and it's made to order. So you need the money right now, I finished for him. Yeah, that'd be great. I hesitated. This might be the last time I ever wire him money. Okay, I'll make the transfer now. Thanks, Dad. You're a real lifesaver. By the way, did you remember about dinner Friday night? No, I didn't. Oh, great. We'll pick you up. I'll be at your house at 6 o'clock. That's okay. I'll drive myself. But your car? He hesitated. It's not really appropriate for a place like this. People might think, what would people think? Well, you know River Edge is a fancy place. Mostly newer models park there. And your Chevy. Don't worry about my car, I cut him off. I'll be there myself. After the conversation, I sat down at the computer and paid the next bill for the rent of the Vera Beauty Salon. Then I wired $5,000 to Noah. Maybe I'm a fool to keep doing this, but I wanted the ending to be perfect. I wanted them to buy Veronica a present with my money and then find out the truth. The next few days passed in the usual routine. I managed the restaurant, met with suppliers, solved current issues, but my thoughts kept returning to the upcoming dinner. I imagined different scenarios, thought about what I would say. I didn't want to make a scene. It wasn't in my nature. But I wanted them to realize how low they'd fallen in my eyes. On the eve of Veronica's birthday, I checked the reservations and gave additional instructions to the staff. Alice, I addressed the manager, my relatives are coming to the restaurant tomorrow. I will behave like a normal customer. None of the staff is to show that they know me. Very well, Mr. Holloway. I'll let everyone know. Can I prepare a special menu? No. Regular menu, regular prices. No specials. Alice nodded, though there was a question in her eyes. In 10 years of work, she had never seen my relatives in the restaurant. She must have wondered why I was hiding my status from my family, but she was too professional to ask. On the morning of the dinner, I received a strange text from Noah. Dad, bring your checkbook. We want to discuss something important. That was it. It all made sense now. They had invited me to an expensive restaurant for a reason. They needed money more than usual. And they were counting on the fact that in public at Veronica's birthday party, I'd be embarrassed to refuse. I grinned wryly. They didn't even realize they'd trapped themselves. By 6 p.m., I got home, showered and changed. Not my best suit. It was left hanging in the closet. I opted for clean but simple pants and a shirt with no tie. Decent enough not to look sloppy, but far from the look Abby and Veronica expected. Before I left, I lingered by Helen's picture. It's going to be different today, I told her. I think you'd approve. I arrived at the River Edge restaurant 15 minutes before the appointed time. Leaving my old Chevy at the far edge of the parking lot, I walked leisurely up to the building I'd designed myself over 30 years ago. The evening light softly illuminated the stone walls and wooden beams, giving the restaurant a cozy yet sophisticated look. The panoramic windows reflected the sunset, and through them was a view of Eagle Creek, tranquil and majestic. At the entrance, I met my deputy, Mark. He was clearly surprised to see me as a guest rather than a host. Mr. Holloway, everything is ready as you requested, he said quietly. Alice had briefed the staff. Thank you, Mark. Are they here yet? Yes, they arrived about 10 minutes ago. Table by the window as booked. I nodded and went inside, not as the owner, used to being in charge of these walls, but as a regular visitor. It was a strange feeling, I had to admit. Everything around me was mine, from the exquisite handmade lamps to the paintings by local artists on the walls. But tonight, I was just an older man in simple clothes attending a family dinner. The restaurant was about 2/3 full, the usual busyness for a Friday night. The soft jazz that I myself had selected for the evening's program created a pleasant atmosphere. The smell of freshly cooked food filled the room, whetting the appetite even of those who had just eaten. I noticed my family right away. They had one of the best tables, by the panoramic window overlooking the river and the sunset. Veronica sat at the head of the table like a queen on a throne, showing off her new necklace, apparently the gift I'd given her money for. Abby was talking animatedly, gesturing vigorously. Noah sat with a polite smile, nodding from time to time. My grandson Ethan looked frankly bored, tucked into his phone under the table. Good evening, sir. Jessica, the hostess, greeted me. Are you joining someone? Yes, a table in Whitney's name, I replied, playing the part. Of course. Follow me, please. She escorted me across the hall. I noticed how some of the waiters and bartenders had a hard time hiding their surprise at seeing me in such a role, but they were all well-trained and kept a professional demeanor. Ah, there you are at last, Veronica barely glanced at me as I approached the table. We thought you'd be late. I'm never late, I replied calmly, taking the only empty seat between Noah and Ethan. Happy birthday, Veronica. Thank you. She ran her hand over her new necklace. Chirme, what do you think of our present? Real sapphires and diamonds. Very flashy, I replied diplomatically, knowing for sure that the jewelry cost at least $4,000. My money, of course. Exclusive work, Abby boasted. It was custom made. I can imagine. I turned to my grandson. Hi, Ethan. How was school? The boy looked away from the phone and smiled slightly. In his 12, he was the only one in this family who treated me with sincere warmth. Hi, Grandpa. I'm fine. I did my science project, got a perfect score. Good for you. What was it about? It's about the effects of river pollution on the local ecosystem. I even took water samples from Eagle Creek and… Ethan, don't bore Grandpa with your schoolwork, Abby interrupted him. He's not interested in it. Actually, I'm very interested, I objected. Go on, Ethan. But the moment was gone. The boy shrugged his shoulders and looked at his phone again. A waiter came to the table. Daniel, who had been working at the restaurant for 5 years. He kept his expression professionally neutral, though I noticed a slight nervousness in his movements. Good evening. My name is Daniel, and I'll be your waiter tonight. Can I get you something to drink? Yes, Veronica said immediately. A bottle of your finest champagne. And give us the wine list so we can order something to accompany the main courses. Of course, ma'am. I'll bring our signature crystal champagne and the wine list. I shuddered faintly. Cristal at my restaurant was $300 a bottle. Of course, they'd ordered the most expensive, expecting me to pay for it at the end of the night, as I always did during our rare dinners together. Daniel left, and Veronica leaned back in her chair with a satisfied look. This place is amazing, she said, looking around. They say the owner is a genius in the restaurant business. Started from scratch and created one of the most popular places in town. I suppressed a chuckle, if only she knew. Yeah, we heard, Abby said. I bet he's a millionaire. Not like some people. She gave me an eloquent look. Not everything is measured in money, I said calmly. It's easy to talk when you have enough, Veronica parried. These days, you're nothing without money. Daniel returned with champagne and a wine list. Opening the bottle with the dexterity I'd taught him, he poured the champagne into glasses. Are you ready to order, or do you need more time to familiarize yourself with the menu? Give us a couple of minutes, Veronica ordered, studying the menu with a look of connoisseurship. I already knew what I was going to order, because I had prepared the menu myself, but I decided to play along and open the folder too. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Veronica and Abby whispering, looking at the prices. Noah, my son said quietly to me, while the women were busy with the menu, I wanted to talk to you. We've been having some financial difficulties. What are they this time? I tried to speak calmly, even though I already knew where he was going with this. Abby needs a new car. Her Audi's 3 years old and there's some engine trouble. We've been looking at a new model, but the down payment? How much? $15,000, he said it like he was asking for $5 for coffee. I wouldn't ask, but you know, an accountant's salary doesn't allow for that kind of spending, and Abby at her mother's salon doesn't make much either. I looked at my son in silence. He was once an ambitious young man who dreamed of a career in finance. Now he had turned into a gutless beggar, completely dependent on the women in his life. $15,000 is a lot, Noah, I said finally, especially since I just gave you $5 for Veronica's present. I know, Dad, but it's important. Abby can't drive an unreliable car. It's a safety issue. Then why not fix the existing one? Or buy a more affordable model? Noah looked around nervously, checking to see if Abby could hear us. Certainly, you know how she is. She needs to be as good as her friends. Otherwise, there's scandals, recriminations. That's a reason to spend 15 grand? Dad, you don't understand. We live in a certain circle. We have to fit in. If Abby doesn't get a new car, everyone will think we're in a financial crisis. Isn't that true? I asked bluntly. Noah's face stretched. No, I mean, we're in temporary difficulties, but everything is under control. Then why do you need my money? Dad, I explained. At that moment, Veronica closed the menu with a determined look. I'm ready to order, she announced. Daniel, a waiter materialized at our table. Yes, ma'am. I'll start with the scallop carpaccio, then the marble beef steak, medium rare, and a bottle of your 10 Chateau Margaux to accompany the main course. I held back a sigh. She'd chosen the most expensive red wine on our list, $500 a bottle, plus an appetizer for $30 and a steak for $70, and that's just for one person. Abby kept up with her mother, ordering tuna tartare and duck breast with truffle sauce. Noah, following their example, chose the lobster cream soup and filet mignon. Even Ethan wasn't allowed to order regular pasta. Abby insisted on steak for him, though the boy clearly wasn't keen. When it was my turn, I calmly said, "I'll have the chicken soup and steak salad, please." Daniel nodded, writing down the order. But Abby couldn't resist commenting. "Seriously, Bert, we're at the best restaurant in town, and you order soup and salad? That even sounds boring." "I prefer simple food," I replied. "Besides, I don't want to spend any extra money." "Don't worry about money," she smiled with fake concern. "We agreed that tonight was a treat. You can afford something decent." I shook my head. "Thank you, but I've chosen what I like." "And my pocketbook," Veronica murmured loud enough for me to hear. Speaking of pockets, Abby stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "Bert, did Noah talk to you about our situation?" "If you mean about the new car, yes." I sipped my water calmly. You're going to help us out?" "The down payment's only 15 grand, which isn't much for—" "For whom?" I interrupted. "For a retiree with a small restaurant on the outskirts of town." Abby was embarrassed for a moment, but quickly pulled herself together. "Well, we know you've been saving all your life, and you have almost no expenses. You haven't even bought new clothes in years. And that's a reason to spend my savings on your new car?" "Not mine, our family car," she tried to sound sincere. "Noah will use it too. And Ethan, it's for the safety of the family." I looked at my son, but he avoided my gaze, scrutinizing the pattern on the tablecloth. "I've already given you 5,000 for Veronica's present," I said, "plus the monthly transfers for the mortgage and Ethan's school. I think that's enough." Both women's faces showed unconcealed disappointment. Noah looked like he wanted to fall through the ground. "Enough?" Veronica asked with a hint of indignation. "Your donations barely cover the basics. A young family should have the best of everything." "Which they'll earn on their own," I countered. "Don't you want to help your own son?" Abby went on the offensive. "What kind of father are you?" "The kind that has been helping for years," I tried to remain calm. "But there's a difference between helping and supporting adults." Luckily, at that moment our appetizers arrived, which lightened the atmosphere a bit. For a while we ate in silence. My chicken soup was perfect. I had developed the recipe myself years ago and made sure it was cooked exactly as it was meant to be. "Grandpa was right," Ethan said suddenly, putting the phone away. "In school we were told that it was important to be financially responsible and to live within your means." Abby almost choked on her tartare. "Ethan, stay out of adult conversations and put the phone away. We're in a restaurant." The boy lowered his eyes guiltily and was silent again. I felt a prick of pity. It seemed that in this family his opinion was no more valued than mine. After the appetizers, the tension eased a little. Veronica and Abby talked passionately about their acquaintances and the latest gossip, with Noah occasionally inserting a meaningless comment. I watched more than participated in the conversation. When the main courses arrived, the conversation returned to money, or rather, my son's and his family's lack of it. "You know, Bert," Veronica began, cutting off a piece of her steak, "I've always thought that older people should be concerned about the future of their children and grandchildren. After all, they don't need anything after they're gone, and the young still have their lives to live." "I don't plan to leave in the near future," I answered dryly, "and I prefer to manage my money myself." "But that's so selfish." Abby couldn't contain her indignation. "You don't have any hobbies, you don't travel, you don't buy anything meaningful. What do you need money for?" "Maybe for a rainy day," I suggested, "or for medical treatment if I get sick." "There's insurance for that," she said. "Your savings could make a real difference in our lives right now. A new car is just the beginning. We could renovate the house, send Ethan to the best summer camp, buy new furniture, and invest in expanding my mom's salon," Veronica added. "It would be a great investment. In a couple years, the income would triple." I looked at her skeptically. "If your current salon was making at least a minimal profit, I might believe it. But as far as I know, you barely make ends meet." "These are temporary difficulties," Veronica was indignant. "A startup always takes time to develop." 3 years is enough time to understand the business prospects," I said. "And judging by the number of clients I've seen in your salon, the prospects are not brilliant." Veronica's face turned red with anger. "What do you know about modern business? Your little restaurant on the outskirts of town is a bygone age. We're creating a premium brand with franchise prospects. I calmly cut a piece of chicken from my salad. Perhaps you're right. I am old-fashioned. But at least I don't live on borrowed money or beg my relatives for money. Dad, don't start, Noah intervened, clearly afraid of a scandal. Let's just enjoy the evening. Sure, Abby smiled falsely. After all, we're here to celebrate Mom's birthday, not to discuss finances. But Veronica wasn't ready to back down. No, let's get this straight. Bert, are you refusing to help your only son and grandson just because of some senile paranoia? I'm not refusing to help, I explained patiently. I refuse to fund your luxurious life, which you can't afford. There you go again. Abby rolled her eyes dramatically. Maybe you should say we should give up our house and move into an apartment. Or that Ethan should go to a regular school instead of a private school. That would be more fiscally responsible, I nodded. You see, Noah? Abby turned to her husband. Your father wants us to live in poverty. He wants our son to go to school with just anyone, so we don't have anything decent. I didn't say that, I objected. I'm only suggesting that we live within our means. Oh, of course, Veronica exclaimed. So convenient to preach modesty when you don't want to share. Things were getting heated. I noticed that some of the customers at the neighboring tables began to glance in our direction. The staff was also watching with concern. Conflicts in the hall were not welcome in my restaurant. Look, I tried to speak softly and calmly. I'm not refusing to help my family. I already do, regularly and substantially. But a new car for $15,000 is an excess that I'm not ready to finance. Overkill? Abby was almost screaming. You consider the safety of your son and grandson an overkill? My car is old and unreliable. Your Audi is only 3 years old, I reminded her. And if there are engine problems, they can be fixed for less than the cost of a new car. Bert, Veronica changed tactics, speaking in a condescending tone, as if to a naughty child. We understand your frugality. At your age, it's normal to be afraid of spending the last of your money. But believe me, you'll feel better when you start helping your family. It'll give you a purpose in life. I felt the irritation growing inside me, but I continued to remain outwardly calm. I have a purpose in life, Veronica, and it doesn't include sponsoring your desire to live beyond your means. How stubborn! Abby threw his napkin on the table. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? Your son is working like hell, and you refuse to help with such a small thing. 15,000 isn't a small thing, I objected. To you, maybe, she countered, but for a normal person with a normal business, a normal amount, the owner of this restaurant probably doesn't count every cent like you do. I held back a smile. If only she knew. Maybe he has other priorities, I said. Exactly, Abby nodded triumphantly. Priorities. Normal people prioritize family. What's yours? Your pathetic savings that you're worried about giving to your family? I looked at her and asked the question that had been on my tongue for a long time. Abby, what have you ever done for me? What have you done to deserve my money? There was silence in the room. Abby froze with her mouth open, unable to find an answer at once. Veronica came to her daughter's aid. How dare you? Abby is your son's wife, your grandson's mother. She's part of the family. Family is about mutual support, I said, not a one-way financial injection. I know what that is, Abby finally found her voice, and it was oozing with venom. It's senile greed. You're just jealous that we're young and can enjoy life, and you can't. Dad, Abby, please, let's not. Noah tried to intervene, but no one would listen to him. You know what, Bert? Abby leaned across the table, her eyes burning with righteous anger. You're just a pathetic old man clinging to his pennies because he's got nothing else. No family to respect him, no real business, no future. Abby! Noah was terrified. No, let him know the truth. She couldn't stop. We put up with him out of courtesy, out of respect for your late mother, and he pays us with black ingratitude. I listened to this stream of insults in silence. Somewhere in the periphery of my consciousness, I noted how the waiters froze, watching the scene, how the other customers were whispering, casting curious glances in our direction. Noah, Abby continued, Tell your father that we will no longer put up with his stinginess. Let him decide. Either he helps the family or we stop talking to him." My son looked confused and unhappy, sandwiched between his wife and his father. "Abby, maybe not here," he started. "No, right here." She banged her hand on the table, making the dishes clink. "Let everyone hear. Bert, you either give us the money for the car and the salon, or you forget you have a family." I looked at her and saw a man who had completely lost control because of greed. This was no longer my sister-in-law, but a greedy creature willing to do anything for money. "Are you seriously giving me an ultimatum?" I asked quietly. "Yes," she shouted. "Stop pretending to be poor. We know you have money. And if you don't, then you're even more pathetic than we thought," Veronica interjected, supporting her daughter. "Working your whole life for nothing, that's something to be able to do." Abby grinned contemptuously. "A beggar like you is entitled to nothing but scraps." Veronica laughed loudly, as if she'd heard a good joke. Abby joined her. They laughed, looking at me with undisguised superiority. I noticed one of the waiters, young Tony, almost drop his tray in indignation. Alice, standing at the bar, gave him a warning gesture. The entire staff knew who I was, and now they could hardly contain their emotions as they watched me being insulted in my own establishment. After Abby's insults and Veronica's laughter, there was an awkward silence in the room. I sat there, calmly looking at my relatives, though inside I was seething with anger and frustration. This wasn't how I'd envisioned my family years ago, when Helen and I were making plans for the future. Noah looked confused and unhappy. He lowered his eyes, unable to look at me or his wife. Ethan, my grandson, looked at his mother with an expression of shock and incomprehension. Apparently, he had never seen this side of Abby before. "Mom, how can you talk to Grandpa like that?" the boy whispered at last. Abby changed her expression instantly, smiling at her son with feigned tenderness. "Honey, grown-ups sometimes say harsh things to each other. It's called honesty. I just want your grandfather to understand the importance of family. By humiliating him in front of everyone?" Ethan didn't give in to the manipulation. "Ethan," Abby's voice became stern, "don't interfere in the conversations of your elders. And put the phone away. How many times do I have to tell you?" I saw the boy shrink, but something new flashed in his eyes. The realization of what his mother and grandmother were really like. Well, perhaps this evening will teach him a lesson. Daniel, our waiter, chose that moment to come to the table. "Is everything all right? Can I get you dessert or coffee?" "Yeah, we're fine," Veronica retorted, not yet cooled down from the altercation. "And yes, bring us a dessert card." Daniel nodded and left. I noticed him exchange quick glances with the other members of the staff. They were all confused, not knowing how to react to their boss's humiliation. I shook my head faintly, a signal to keep the game going for now. "So," Veronica decided to change tactics, speaking in a businesslike tone. "Let's summarize. Bert, you refuse to help your family, and we take that to heart. But don't think there won't be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" I asked calmly, sipping my water. "First, you can forget about regular visits from your grandson. Ethan has a busy schedule, and we can't waste his time with unproductive meetings." I looked at my grandson. The boy's eyes widened with surprise and resentment. "But I want to see my grandfather," he objected. "Honey, we'll discuss this at home," Abby told him. "Second," Veronica continued, ignoring Ethan's protest, "we're going to have to reconsider your living arrangements. At your age, it's not safe for you to live alone." "What do you mean?" I was wary. "Sonia, that there are excellent nursing homes," she said with fake concern. "Public ones, of course. You probably don't have money for private ones." "Mom's right," Abby said. "We've been talking about it for a long time. Your house is too big for one person. You could sell it and use the money to pay for a nursing home and maybe help your family." I couldn't believe my ears. Not only did they think I was an elderly loser, but they were planning to dispose of my property. "Had you thought to ask my opinion?" I asked. "Bert," Veronica leaned across the table to me, "when a person becomes elderly, he or she is not always able to make rational decisions. It's a scientifically proven fact. And who's going to decide for me?" "You." "Noah, of course," she smiled as if it were an obvious truth. He's your only relative, and as an accountant, he's great with finances. I glanced at my son. He was still avoiding my gaze, but it was clear from his demeanor that they had discussed this topic before. Noah, is it true? I asked quietly. He finally looked up, his eyes a mixture of shame and stubbornness. Dad, we're really worried about you. Your house needs repairs. You live alone. Your job takes a lot of energy. And the solution is to put me in a nursing home and sell my real estate? Not right away, of course. He tried to soften the situation. We were thinking of getting a guardianship first. It's for your own safety. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own son, whom I had given so many years of my life and helped so much, was willing to declare me incompetent for money. It hurt more than any insult to Abby. Daniel returned with the dessert menu, and the conversation temporarily stopped. Abby and Veronica were enthusiastically studying the dessert list, as if they hadn't just discussed a plan to incarcerate me. The chocolate fondant looks delicious, Veronica said, and the lavender creme brulee. Oh, and the tiramisu, Abby exclaimed. I love tiramisu. Ethan, dear, what will you have? The boy shook his head. I'm not hungry. Don't be silly, we're in the best restaurant in town. Take at least an ice cream. I don't want to, he repeated stubbornly. Abby sighed irritably. Okay, suit yourself. Noah? I think I'll skip dessert too. My son looked like he couldn't get a bite down his throat. Bert? Veronica addressed me with fake politeness. How about some vanilla pudding? It's not too expensive for your budget. No, thank you, I replied calmly. I'm satisfied with dinner. Well, it's just me and Abby then. She turned to Daniel. Chocolate fondant and creme brulee, and 2 cappuccinos. Of course, ma'am, the waiter wrote down the order. Anything else? Yes, Abby interjected. A bottle of your finest dessert wine. You have Tokay, don't you? Of course, Daniel nodded. Tokay Asu Essence, 15 years old. I almost choked. That wine was on our menu for $250 a bottle. But now I understood their plan. They were ordering the most expensive, counting on me to pay the bill at the end, as usual. Despite all the insults and humiliation, they still considered me a cash cow. While Daniel carried out the order, I observed the behavior of my relatives. They completely ignored me as if I was nothing. Veronica was busily discussing expansion plans with her daughter, and Abby was glancing around at the other customers, assessing their outfits and jewelry. Not a shred of remorse or embarrassment after they'd just planned to deprive me of my freedom. I was especially discouraged by the attitude of the restaurant staff. Abby snapped her fingers several times to summon the waiters, and Veronica made disparaging remarks about the speed of service. They behaved like pampered aristocrats, when in fact they were petty, unsuccessful businesswomen living beyond their means. Why does it take so long to make desserts here? Veronica was loudly indignant when only 5 minutes had passed since the order had been placed. In decent restaurants, the service is much faster. I noticed Daniel's shoulders tense at the next table. He was well aware of our restaurant's standards. The desserts were made fresh, and that took time. The staff doesn't seem to be up to par, Abby's mother said. I'd have to tell the owner. I could hardly contain a chuckle. If only they knew who they were threatening to complain to. Finally, the desserts were served, perfectly arranged, as was everything in my restaurant. The pastry chef, Maria, was a true artist, turning each dessert into a work of art. Not bad, Veronica admitted grudgingly, tasting her creme brulee. I've had better, though. In Paris, Abby said, remember that restaurant on the Champs-Élysées? That was a real dessert. I knew they had never been to Paris. All their international experience had been limited to a 5-day trip to Cancun 3 years ago, which, by the way, I had also paid for. Watching them, I thought about my son. What had happened to that ambitious, honest young man that Helen and I had raised? How had he allowed himself to become a gutless puppet, completely controlled by his wife and mother-in-law? Helen was always worried that Noah was too soft, too compliant. He wants everyone to like him, Bert, she used to say. And that could get him into trouble. How right she was. Noah had married Abby shortly after Helen's death, perhaps looking for a replacement mother figure in his life. But instead of a caring companion, He'd gotten a manipulator who'd gradually alienated him from his father and turned him into a money-making tool. Looking at him now, slouching, eyes drooping, listening to his wife's chatter without complaint, I felt a pang of pity. He was no longer my son, but a pale shadow of him. "Do you think the restaurant is doing well?" Veronica asked suddenly, looking around the almost full room. "It must be," Abby nodded. "They're getting about $1,000 for our table alone." "Not bad business," Veronica said thoughtfully. "Maybe we should consider the restaurant industry for investment. After we expand the salon, of course." "Why not?" Abby clearly liked the idea. "Imagine your own restaurant." We'd show her how to run a business like that the right way. I could barely contain my laughter as I listened to their fantasies. They had no idea how much labor, knowledge, and experience it takes to successfully run a restaurant, especially a restaurant like River Edge. "You know," I said, "the restaurant business is not as easy as it looks. High competition, complicated logistics, personnel problems." "Oh, Bert, don't start your lectures," Veronica interrupted me. "We're talking about serious business, not your little diner on the outskirts of town." "Exactly," Abby said. "There's a difference between a family restaurant and a premium establishment. It's like comparing your Chevy to my Audi." I remained silent, but smiled inwardly, anticipating the moment when they would learn the truth. Finally, the desserts were eaten and the wine was drunk. The moment I'd been waiting for all evening came, paying the bill. "Daniel," Veronica called out, tapping her fingernails impatiently on the table. "The bill, please." "Right away, ma'am," the waiter replied and quickly left. "So, Bert," Abby turned to me with a fake smile, "I suppose you'll be paying for our dinner, as usual?" "Am I?" I raised an eyebrow. "After all that was said at the table?" "Well, don't be petty." She waved it away. "It's Mom's birthday. And besides, you said yourself that you're not refusing to help your family. Helping and paying for luxurious whims are different things." "Dad," Noah interjected in a conciliatory tone, "let's not spoil the evening. I'll pay for my share." "What?" Abby turned to her husband indignantly. "You can't be serious. It's tradition. Your father always pays for family dinners. After you called him a beggar who only gets leftovers?" Noah reminded me. "I was just overreacting." Abby laughed nervously. "Bert realizes it was a joke, doesn't he?" I looked her straight in the eye. "No, Abby, it wasn't a joke. Neither were your plans to declare me incompetent and put me in a nursing home." "We're just concerned about your well-being," Veronica interjected with feigned concern. "But if you insist on paying the bill, we won't object." At that moment, Daniel returned with a leather folder for the bill. I noticed the barely restrained smile on his face and realized my plan had worked. "Your bill," he said, placing the folder in front of Veronica. "It's all included." She opened the folder and turned pale. "What is this? There's some kind of mistake. What's wrong?" Abby leaned over to her mother, peering at the bill. "Oh my God, $1,700? That's impossible." "Allow me," Daniel pointed to the lines on the bill. "Crystal Champagne, $300. Chateau Margaux wine, $500. Tokay dessert wine, $250. Plus your appetizers, main courses, desserts." "But it's a robbery," Veronica exclaimed. "We didn't know that wine cost so much." "The prices are on the wine list, ma'am," Daniel replied calmly. "You didn't ask about the cost when you ordered. We usually get a discount." Abby looked like she was about to cry. "We're the owner's family." I froze. "That's it. They knew all along?" "Excuse me, ma'am." Daniel acted surprised. "Did you say the owner's family?" "Yes." Veronica seized on the thought. "My son, in-law, owns this restaurant. Or his partner, I don't know exactly. Either way, we've always gotten a discount." I couldn't believe my ears. They didn't even know for sure who I was, but they weren't shy about using it to their advantage. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're not aware of any discounts for your group." Daniel kept a professional expression on his face, though I could see the corners of his lips twitching. "Achishorn, this is outrageous." Abby raised her voice, drawing the attention of the other customers. "Get the manager right now. We're going to complain." "Of course, ma'am." Daniel left and soon returned with Alice, the restaurant manager. Good evening, she said with a friendly smile. I'm Alice Park, the manager of River Edge. What can I do for you? We have a problem with the bill, Veronica said firmly. We've been charged the full amount, even though we're the restaurant owner's family. Alice looked surprised. The owner's family? Interesting. And who among you is Mr. Holloway's relative? This gentleman here, Veronica pointed at me. Bert Holloway, my son-in-law's father. Alice turned her gaze to me, and a spark of amusement flickered in her eyes. Are you Bert Holloway? Yes, I confirmed calmly. And you're the owner of River Edge? That's right. There was a deafening silence. Abby and Veronica stared at me in shock. Noah literally turned white. Only Ethan didn't seem surprised. Rather, something like respect flashed across his face. But how? Abby whispered. I thought you said you had a little restaurant on the outskirts of... River Edge is my restaurant, I replied. I've owned it for the last 32 years. And yes, it's not in the center of town. Technically, it's in the suburbs. But it's... Veronica looked around the luxurious interior. It's one of the most successful restaurants in the city. Thank you for the compliment. I nodded slightly. Why didn't you ever tell us? Noah looked completely lost. And you never asked, I replied simply. In all these years, not one of you ever asked where exactly my restaurant was, what it was called, how successful it was. You were only interested in my money, not the source of it. Alice coughed delicately. Mr. Holloway, about the discount for family members. No discounts, I said firmly. Give me the full bill. But Dad, Noah looked like he was going to cry. We can't pay that much. I thought you lived in a certain circle and had to fit in, I reminded my son. Dining at an expensive restaurant is part of that lifestyle, isn't it? It's not fair, Abby exclaimed. You deliberately lured us here to humiliate us. I didn't lure anyone anywhere, I said calmly. You chose my restaurant to celebrate Veronica's birthday. And by the way, you didn't even bother to tell me that you were going to use my name to get a discount. Veronica looked as if she had swallowed a lemon. But how are we going to pay this bill? We don't have that kind of money. That's your problem, I said. You ordered the most expensive dishes and wines without asking prices. How did you put it, Abby? A beggar like you is entitled to nothing but scraps? Well, I guess you're the beggars now. There was silence in the restaurant. Abby and Veronica looked at me as if I'd turned into an alien right in front of their eyes. Their faces, which had just been contorted with anger and indignation, were now expressions of pure shock. Abby's eyes widened to an impossible size, her mouth hanging open in mute question. Veronica had gone so pale that her makeup seemed unnaturally bright against her white skin. My son Noah looked confused and lost, as if the ground had gone from under his feet. Only Ethan, my grandson, looked at me with a new respect. His eyes read something like, "So this is who you really are, Grandpa." "You're the owner of River Edge?" Abby finally squeezed out, as if she still couldn't believe what she was hearing. "That restaurant?" "Yes," I answered simply, "for 32 years. But, but... Veronica looked around helplessly at the luxurious interior, the high ceilings with wooden beams, the huge windows overlooking the river. This is one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. Thank you for the compliment, I nodded. We do try to keep it up to a high standard. Why didn't you ever tell us? Noah finally regained his speech. His voice was a mixture of resentment and bewilderment. Akim, you never asked, I shrugged. In all these years, not one of you ever asked where my restaurant was or what it was called. You just thought of it as some diner on the outskirts, and to use Abby's expression. My son blushed and lowered his eyes. You set this whole thing up on purpose, Abby suddenly exclaimed, going from shock to accusation. You lured us here to humiliate us. That's just mean. I didn't lure anyone anywhere, I said calmly. You chose my restaurant to celebrate Veronica's birthday. And I even tried to clarify the name of the place, if you remember our conversation. Veronica seemed to begin to come to her senses. There was a calculating light in her eyes. Bert, darling, we're terribly sorry for the misunderstanding. She tried to make her voice soft, but it was fake. Of course, if we'd known it was your restaurant... So what? I interrupted. Would we have behaved differently? Called me a beggar? Didn't plan to put me in a nursing home? We were just concerned for your well-being. Abby picked up her mother's line. You live alone in a big house. You never talk about your affairs. How could we have known? We could have wondered, I remarked, instead of making plans to dispose of my property behind my back. There was an awkward pause. The customers at the nearby tables did not hide their interest in our conversation, although they tried to pretend that they were engrossed in their food. Alice, my manager, coughed delicately. Mr. Holloway, perhaps it would be more convenient for you to continue the conversation in your office? I thought for a moment. It really wasn't the best idea for my family and the reputation of the place to have a conversation in the middle of a restaurant. Good idea, Alice. Would you please prepare my office and bring the bill there? We'll continue this conversation in a more private setting. Of course, sir, she nodded and left. You have an office here? Veronica couldn't hide her surprise. Of course, I answered. I've worked here every day for the last 30 years. We rose from the table and headed across the room to an inconspicuous door at the back of the restaurant. I could feel the eyes of the staff on me, sympathetic and a little curious. They all knew me as a fair and reserved boss, and it was a shock to many to see how my own family treated me. My office didn't look like a typical executive's office. No flashy chairs or expensive paintings, a simple desk, a few comfortable chairs, and bookshelves of cookbooks and business publications. The only decorations were Helen's portrait on the wall and a panoramic window with a view of the river, even better than in the main room. Please make yourselves comfortable. I pointed to the chairs around the small conference table in the corner of the office. Abby and Veronica entered hesitantly, as if expecting a catch. Noah looked completely defeated, and Ethan looked frankly curious. So, I began when everyone was seated, I think it's time for an honest conversation. Bert, Veronica tried to take the lead. We recognize that there has been an unfortunate misunderstanding. Perhaps some harsh words were spoken. Harshness? I raised an eyebrow. You were planning to declare me incompetent and send me to a nursing home to dispose of my assets. It was just a suggestion. Abby splashed her hands. We were worried about you. Your house needs repairs. Your car is old. My house is in perfect condition, I interrupted. As for the car, it's reliable and I'm completely satisfied with it. Unlike your 3-year-old Audi, which you say breaks down all the time. Abby blushed and stopped talking. Alice entered the office with a folder in her hands. The invoice as you requested, Mr. Holloway. She placed the folder on the desk. And I also brought those financial documents you prepared last week. Thank you, Alice. I nodded. That'll be all. When the door closed behind her, I opened the file. You know, I said quietly, the ironic thing about this situation is that you've been living off me for years while calling me a loser. What are you talking about? Veronica tried to feign bewilderment, but fear flashed in her eyes. This, I put the first bank statement on the table. Over the past year, I transferred more than $70,000 into Noah's account. Monthly mortgage payments, Ethan's private school tuition, insurance, emergency loans that were never paid back. Ethan's eyes widened. Apparently the boy didn't know his tuition was being paid for by me. Noah lowered his head even lower, as if trying to become invisible. And these, I held out the next document, are monthly payments to Styling Solutions for supposed consulting services for my restaurant, a company that, oddly enough, is registered in your name, Veronica. She turned even paler, if that was even possible. I don't know what you mean. You do, I was adamant. Over the past 3 years, through this shell company, I transferred about $200,000 to support your beauty salon, paying rent, buying equipment, paying off loans. Without that money, Vera Beauty would have gone bankrupt in its first year. That's not true, Abby shrieked. Our salon is thriving. We have regular clients, exclusive services, and losses averaging $10,000 a month, I finished for her, which I covered through sham contracts. But, how? Veronica seemed to begin to realize the magnitude of the situation. We never asked you to finance the salon. No, I agreed. You asked Noah, and he asked me. First it was a temporary loan to buy equipment, then a little help with rent, then urgent repayment of debt to suppliers. The list could go on for a long time. I looked at my son. Noah, did you really think that I don't understand where this money goes? That I don't check how such sums are used? Yai, I didn't know what to do, he mumbled. They kept demanding money, saying that without it the business would collapse, that we'd lose everything. So you decided to just milk your old father instead of telling me the truth? Dad, I don't blame him, Abby stepped in. I insisted. Mom opened the salon after the divorce, put all her money into it. We couldn't let him go broke. It would have killed her. So you've been lying to me for years, using my son as a middleman, I summarized, while treating me with contempt and considering me a loser. There was a heavy pause. Even Abby seemed unable to find the words to justify it. Grandpa, Ethan said suddenly, I, I didn't know you were paying for my school, thank you. This simple, sincere thank you from a 12-year-old boy contrasted with the silence of the adults who had been using my money for years without expressing an ounce of gratitude. You're welcome, Ethan, I smiled at my grandson. Your education is the only thing I have never spared money for. What will happen to our school now? Asked the boy bluntly. If you don't pay anymore? The question hung in the air. Abby and Veronica waited tensely for my answer. Noah seemed to shrink back in his chair. You know, Ethan, I looked carefully at my grandson. I always thought that education is the best investment, but the decision about your school now will be made by your parents, based on their real possibilities. So, you're gonna stop helping us? Abby looked like I was announcing the end of the world. After everything we've been through together? After you called me a beggar who's entitled to nothing but scraps? After you planned to declare me incompetent? I shook my head. Yes, Abby, I'm going to stop funding your lifestyle, which you can't afford. But what about the mortgage? Ethan's school? The salon? There was real panic in her voice. We're not going to survive. You're going to have to learn to live within your means, I said firmly. Maybe sell the house and buy something more affordable. Transfer Ethan to a regular school where, believe me, the education can be just as good. And as for the salon, I looked at Veronica, who looked like she was about to faint. Without my support, I'm afraid he's doomed. You have too much debt and too few customers. You can't do that, Veronica exclaimed. It's my right to manage my money, I finished for her, just as it's your right to treat me with contempt all these years. Everyone makes their own choices and lives with the consequences. Dad, Noah finally looked up. I understand your frustration, but maybe we could find a compromise, at least for Ethan's sake. What kind of compromise are you suggesting? I asked. Keep paying as long as you continue to see me as a burden? No, he shook his head. We've all realized our mistakes. Right, Abby? My sister, in-law, nodded reluctantly, though her eyes said otherwise. Of course. We were wrong. We're sorry, Bert. This apology was so insincere that even Ethan looked at his mother skeptically. I'm not looking for apologies, I said, especially a forced one. I just want you to understand the reality. From now on, you're living on the money you earn on your own. What about the dinner bill? Veronica suddenly remembered. $1,700. We just don't have that kind of money. You have credit cards, I said, which you weren't shy about using to buy designer clothes and jewelry. But they're almost maxed out, Abby exclaimed. You know our situation? No, Abby, I shook my head. I knew what you were telling me, and you were obviously lying, so I don't know your real financial situation, and frankly, it doesn't concern me anymore. Would you really make us pay that amount of money? Veronica looked shocked. After everything you just told me about your help? I wondered for a moment, what would Helen do in such a situation? She'd probably say that the lesson had already been taught, and there was no point in getting them financially wounded as well. On the other hand, I remembered all the insults, all the neglect, all the manipulation of the last few years. This bill, I took a folder from the table, is your last lesson from me. You're used to living large at other people's expense, accustomed to not looking at prices, ordering the most expensive dishes and wines. You're used to having someone else solve your problems at the end. It's time you learn to take responsibility for your own decisions. I'll pay, Noah said suddenly, straightening up. It's my responsibility. I looked at my son carefully. There was a determination in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years. Okay, I nodded, but this is just the beginning. You will have to rethink your whole way of life. We can't do that, Abby exclaimed. We have mortgages, loans, Ethan's school. Without your help, we'll just go broke. Maybe, I agreed, but it would be the result of your own decisions, not mine. I've let you guys use me for too long thinking I was helping. In fact, I've only contributed to your irresponsibility. What about your will? Veronica suddenly asked, showing an amazing ability to think about money even in this situation. Noah would still inherit the restaurant and the fortune, wouldn't he? I looked at her in bewilderment. Did she really think I'd leave them my life's work after all this? No, Veronica, I said firmly. I've already made the changes to the will. Noah is no longer my sole heir. What? Abby jumped up. You can't do that. He's your son. I can and I did, I replied calmly. Most of my fortune will go to charity, educational foundations, and support for aspiring restaurateurs. Noah will get a certain amount, but not control of the business. That's not fair, she exclaimed. It should stay in the family. What family, Abby? I looked her straight in the eye. The one that planned to declare me incompetent? The one that thought I was a burden and a failure? The one that had used me for years without showing me a shred of respect or gratitude? She couldn't find an answer. What about Ethan? Noah asked. It wasn't his fault. I've set up a separate education fund for Ethan, I said, looking at my grandson. The money will go directly to his college education when the time comes. Neither you nor Abby will be able to access those funds. The boy's face brightened. Really? Thank you, Grandpa. It's not fair, Abby exclaimed again. We're his parents. We should decide. No, Abby, I interrupted. You've proven that you don't know how to make financial decisions. So the fund will be managed by the trustees, and the money will be used only for Ethan's education. Veronica, realizing that the situation was completely out of control, decided to change tactics. Bert, darling, we all overreacted. You're right. We've been ungrateful and perhaps reliant on your help. But we can make it up to you. Give us a chance to prove that we've changed. It's too late, Veronica. I shook my head. There are too many lies, too many manipulations. I don't believe a word you say anymore. Then what's all this for? Noah suddenly asked. Why did you have to put on this dinner show if you'd already made up your mind? I looked at my son carefully. Because I wanted you to realize who you really were all these years. Parasites, living off the man you despised. I wanted you to see yourself from the outside and maybe learn a lesson for the future. And what lesson should we learn? Noah asked bitterly. That you can't base your life on lies and manipulation, I answered simply. That you can't despise the person you depend on. And that a real family is not just blood ties, but mutual respect and care. There was a heavy silence in the office. Everyone in the room was immersed in their own thoughts. Abby and Veronica looked utterly shattered. Their world, built on the financial support of the loser, had collapsed overnight. Noah seemed lost between loyalty to his wife and the realization of betrayal towards his father. Only Ethan, despite the seriousness of the situation, seemed a little encouraged, perhaps seeing for the first time that adults could also be held accountable for their actions. I slid the folder with the bill over to Noah. Here's your bill. Pay it on the way out. Okay, he replied quietly, pulling out a credit card. One more thing, I added. Vera Beauty Salon owes my company for the last 3 months of consulting services. $30,000. Due by the end of the month. It had been a week since the ill-fated dinner at River Edge. I was sitting in my office reviewing the restaurant's financial statements when there was a knock on the door. Come in, I said, keeping my eyes on the paperwork. Alice, my loyal manager, appeared on the doorstep. Mr. Holloway, you have visitors. Your son and his wife and her mother. I looked up, a little surprised. After our last conversation, I hadn't expected them to dare show up here again. Show them in, I nodded, putting the papers aside. A moment later, Noah, Abby, and Veronica entered the office. All three of them looked noticeably worse than they had the week before. Noah was gaunt, dark circles under his eyes. Abby and Veronica, usually impeccably dressed and makeup, looked almost ordinary today. Minimal makeup, simple clothes. Apparently, reality was starting to catch up with them. Hello, Dad, Noah said quietly, almost guiltily. We'd like to talk to you. Have a seat, I pointed to the chairs in front of my desk. They settled awkwardly across from me. No one dared to speak first until Veronica finally cleared her throat. Bert, we've come to apologize, she began with an unaccustomed modesty. Our behavior at dinner was inexcusable. We were shocked and behaved inappropriately. Abby picked up on it. Especially me. What I said about, leftovers and stuff. It was awful, and I'm deeply sorry. I watched them carefully, trying to see the sincerity in their eyes. But all I saw was calculation and fear. Fear of the financial problems that would inevitably await them without my support. And what made you come to that conclusion? I asked calmly. They looked at each other, not expecting such a question. We've been thinking a lot, Noah began uncertainly, about how we've treated you all these years, how we've accepted your help without thanking you enough. And we've come to the conclusion that we were wrong, Abby added with fake remorse. We'd like to make things right. A fresh start. I leaned back in my chair, scrutinizing their faces. What about the plans to declare me incompetent and put me in a nursing home? We've never seriously considered that option, Veronica exclaimed. It was just a bad joke. A joke? I raised an eyebrow. You were discussing my future, handling my assets behind my back, and that was a joke? No, not a joke, Noah shook his head. I'm not going to lie. We did discuss it, but I would never take such a step. Never. There was more sincerity in his voice than there was in the women's, but it didn't inspire confidence. For too long, he'd been a puppet in their hands. And what do you want from me now? I asked bluntly. Again, there was an awkward silence. Finally, Abby made up her mind. We were hoping you'd reconsider your financial aid, at least for a transitional period, until we get back on our feet. This is it, the real reason for their visit. Not remorse, not a desire to repair the relationship, but a simple need for money. How long do you expect to stay? I asked. A month? A year? 10 years? We realize we've abused your kindness, Veronica said quickly. But now we really need help. The salon is on the verge of closing. Because of what? I interrupted. Because I stopped subsidizing it? Or because it was unprofitable and inefficient to begin with? She bit her lip, not knowing what to say. We could change the business model, Abby suggested. Perhaps you could become an official investor with a share in the profits? In what profits? I waved my hands. In the 3 years I've been in business, the salon has never been profitable, not even close. We can change that, Veronica insisted, with the right management and your advice. I shook my head. You haven't listened to my advice for the last 3 years. Why should we start now? Because now we realize how successful you are, Abby admitted. Your restaurant is one of the best in town. We were blind not to see that before. You mean you respect me just because you recognize my financial situation? I clarified. Not because of my human qualities, but because of my money? They fell silent again, cornered by their own logic. Noah finally decided to take the initiative. Dad, I understand your distrust. We've earned it by our actions, but I'm asking you to think about Ethan. If you won't help Abby and me, at least help your grandson. He's going to have to change schools, lose friends. Whose fault is that? I asked quietly. Who created a lifestyle you can't afford? Who taught your child to standards that you can't provide on your own? We wanted to give him the best. Abby looked almost genuinely upset. Is that a bad thing? Not if you can afford it, I replied. But living on borrowed time, at the expense of others, creating the illusion of prosperity, is cheating. And that includes Ethan. So you won't help us? Veronica's voice sounded distrustful. Even though you know the salon will close, that we'd have to sell the house, that Ethan would get hurt? I've already told you that the education fund for Ethan will remain in place, I reminded her. He can get a college education when the time comes. But your financial problems are the result of your decisions. I've been your hedge against the consequences for too long. Abby couldn't take it anymore. You're just getting revenge on us. Enjoying our problems because of a few harsh words? A few harsh words. I raised an eyebrow. You've treated me with contempt for years, using my money. plan to deprive me of my freedom for the sake of controlling my property. That's not a few harsh words, Abby. It's an indication of how you really feel about me. There was a heavy silence in the office. Noah looked utterly mortified, realizing there was no chance of changing my mind. "What do we do now?" he asked quietly. "What all grown-ups do," I answered. "Live within our means, work, pay our bills." "We're going to lose everything," Veronica exclaimed. I'm too old to start over." "You're 55, I argued. "A lot of people that age are just starting to find themselves. The problem is not your age, but your unwillingness to change." "That's cruel," Abby muttered. "After all we've been through together." "How have you treated me all these years?" I asked bluntly. "Was it kind? Like a family?" They didn't have an answer. I sighed, feeling not so much angry as tired. "Look, I mean you no harm, but I'm not going to sponsor your life anymore. You're going to have to learn to manage on your own. This isn't revenge. It's just common sense." "You could at least give me severance pay," Veronica suggested. "You're basically firing us." I couldn't believe my ears. Even now in this situation, she was only thinking about how to get more money from me. "Veronica, I didn't hire you. I was the source of your ill-gotten gains. And now that source has dried up. Call it what you want, but there will be no severance package." Noah rose from his seat. His face was a mixture of disappointment and humility. "I understand, Dad. You've made your decision, and I respect it. But I have to choose my family. Abby, Ethan, they need me now." "I know, son," I nodded, "and I wouldn't expect otherwise." "It doesn't mean I'm giving up on you," he added hastily. "It's just, I need to be with them. Help them through this." Of course. I realized that he still didn't realize how deeply entangled he was in their manipulations. They left as suddenly as they had come. I was left alone in the study, looking at Helen's picture. What would she say now? Would she approve of my actions, or would she consider them too cruel? I would never know, but deep down, I felt I'd done the right thing. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the most necessary. 3 months passed. Life had taken a new direction. I was fully focused on the restaurant, introducing a few new dishes that were a hit with customers. The relationship with my son dwindled to occasional short calls, mostly concerning Ethan. I regularly invited my grandson for weekend getaways, and to my surprise, Abby did not discourage these gatherings. Apparently, the situation in their family was so complicated that an extra weekend without a child was to her advantage. From Alice, who somehow kept in touch with the staff of the beauty parlor, I learned news about Veronica and her business. As I predicted, without my financial support, Vera Beauty quickly fell into debt. At first, Veronica tried to save the situation by taking out high-interest loans, but that only made things worse. By the end of the second month, most of the staff had quit because of salary delays. By the end of the third, a bankruptcy notice appeared on the salon's door. Noah and Abby were also facing financial difficulties. They were forced to put their house up for sale, but because of the mortgage and falling real estate prices, the deal promised to be unprofitable. Ethan transferred to a regular public school. Fortunately, he adapted quickly and even found new friends. Abby had to sell her Audi and move to a used Ford. Apparently, the change was particularly hard on her. On Monday evening, when the restaurant was usually closed, I was sitting at home, enjoying a rare moment of peace. The doorbell rang unexpectedly. Noah stood on the doorstep, gaunt, faded, but strangely determined. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. I stepped back silently, letting him into the house. We sat down in the living room, where the family had once spent a lot of time together. Noah clenched his fingers together nervously, not knowing where to begin. "Abby left me," he finally said. 3 days ago." I couldn't say I was surprised. Abby had always been looking for gain and comfort. When Noah stopped being the source of those benefits, she predictably lost interest in him. "I'm sorry," I said, and it was the truth. Despite all my disappointment in my son, I didn't want him to suffer. "Ah, she met someone else," Noah continued with a bitter chuckle. "The owner of a chain of car dealerships. Rich, successful, just the way she likes it. And Ethan, she wants to take him with her, says she can give him a better life." "Yeah, I don't know what to do, Dad. I sighed. The situation was predictable, but it was no less painful. Do you still love her? I asked bluntly. Noah was silent for a long time, pondering his answer. I don't know, he finally admitted. The last few months have been difficult. She kept telling me that I couldn't convince you to help, that I don't make enough money, that I'd ruined her life. And you believed her? Sometimes I did, he looked up at me. You were right about her, about all of them. They never really loved me. I was just a, a source of money, your money. I'm sorry you had to find out that way. No, he shook his head. I should have realized it a long time ago. Mom always saw right through Abby, said she was with me for stability, not love, but I didn't listen. We sat in silence, each of us absorbed in our own thoughts. Outside the window, it was starting to rain, a fine, drizzling rain, typical of fall in our town. I came to apologize, Noah said at last, for everything, for the way we treated you, for the way we used you, for not being strong enough to resist their manipulations. I looked at my son carefully, trying to see if he was sincere this time. There was real pain and remorse in his eyes. What's next? I asked. I don't know, he admitted. The house is for sale, but it's hard to find a buyer. I'm trying to find a second job to pay off my debts. I want to fight for Ethan. He deserves better than living with a mother who only sees him as a status accessory. It won't be easy, I warned. Abby's not one to give up easily. I know she isn't, but I have to try, for Ethan's sake, and for me. I nodded, respecting his determination. For the first time in a long time, I saw in him an echo of the strong, determined young man he'd been before he met Abby. Dad, he stammered, searching for words, I'm not asking you to go back to the way things were. I'm not asking for money or help. I just wanted you to know that I realize how much we hurt you, and I'm truly sorry. I looked at my son for a long time. Part of me wanted to believe him, to help him, to bring back the warm relationship we'd had before Abby came along. But the other part remembered too much betrayal, too many lies. I believe you're sorry, Noah, I finally said, and I don't hold a grudge against you. But trust, it's not easy to rebuild. I understand, he said quietly, and I'm not asking for more. I just wanted you to know. After he left, I sat in the chair for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. Our relationship with my son had been irreparably damaged. There was too much bitterness, too much frustration. Perhaps in time we would find a way to communicate respectfully and calmly, especially for Ethan's sake. But the close contact we once had cannot be regained. It's been 6 months. Life had taken on a new rhythm and meaning. I opened a second restaurant in the northern part of the city, smaller and simpler than River Edge, but with the same philosophy of quality and attention to detail. Alice became its manager, proving she was ready for more responsibility. I started spending more time with my grandson. Noah won joint custody, and Ethan spent every weekend with him. Often they would stop by my house, and we would cook together or just talk. The boy turned out to be remarkably wise for his age, accepting the changes in the family with an understanding the adults lacked. Abby did marry a car dealership owner, but their relationship quickly frayed. Her new husband was not as malleable as Noah and had no tolerance for wastefulness. In addition, he had 3 children from a previous marriage, with whom Abby did not find common language. Veronica, having lost her salon and all her savings, was forced to take a job as a receptionist in a small hair salon. The sharp drop in status was not easy for her, and she often complained to Noah when they met that, "It's all because of your stubborn father." And I found what I had been missing for years: sincere relationships with people who valued me for my personal qualities, not my money. My new family consisted of my loyal restaurant staff, with whom we had company dinners every month, and new friends from the jazz club I'd finally found time to join. One evening, sitting on the terrace of the river edge and watching the sunset over the river, I thought about Helen. What would she say, seeing how things had turned out? Would she approve of my decisions? I could almost physically feel her presence beside me and her smile as if to say, "Bert, you've finally learned to appreciate yourself. Better late than never." Life went on, and for the first time in a long time, I felt not just existing, but truly alive. Money, status, ostentatious respect, all of these turned out to be less important than sincere relationships and a quiet conscience. After all, true wealth is not measured by the numbers in your bank account, but by the quality of your life and the people who surround you. My blood family may never be the same again, but I have learned to appreciate what I have rather than regret what I don't have. And that, I guess, is what real wisdom is all about.